Hi, I'm David Humphreys and welcome to part 2 of our tutorial from Property Investor Mastermind on location due diligence and completing the report that we put out as a template, which is a free download from Property Investor Mastermind. Just to remind you, this is an unscripted tutorial, so I apologize in advance for any ums, ahs, buts, ifs and uncertainty, as I've just demonstrated in speaking. As I say, it's a live tutorial and is unscripted. Okay, at the end of part 1 we finished off with transport and the various methods of transport which we've listed here. If you can think of any more, just put them in. Also, as it says here, website links will also be useful. This document needs to be treated, or you need to think about this document as a sales document. It's not, the purpose of it is not only to enable you to carry out structured due diligence, in the sense that it drives you to ask questions about your location and about the neighbourhoods within the location. I know when I was testing the beta versions of this document, I learnt a lot, a surprising amount, about a location and neighbourhood that I had been working in for best part 20 years. And I hadn't invested in it, mind you. Well, I'd tell a lie. I bought a couple of properties in it, but they were some time ago. But I mean, one aspect that I had not gone into was going up to 2 ex-local authority estates in the location, and I'll show them to you later in the location, which I had never been onto. I'd never been in them in my life. I've been in this game for quite some time. So I suspect you will find out things or aspects and about both the location and neighbourhoods within the location that you simply aren't aware of. Anyway, as I say, treat it as a sales document. So take buses as an example. You know, certainly include a website to it, or a web link to the buses, and whilst possibly you don't want to be putting costs in because you want to update those reasonably regularly, although you can put a cost in and say this is the cost at September 2011 or something of that nature. Certainly comment, if you can comment on things like whether A bus company is better than B bus company, something like that. Personalise it and make it interesting to listen to, because it's not only a due diligence report for your point of view, it's not only to be used to demonstrate your expertise to people like lenders and joint venture partners. I'll come back to lenders in a minute, but also the intention is to use this to generate interest in your properties, either from a tenant point of view or from a buyer point of view. So if you know all about a neighbourhood and the reasons why you're investing in the neighbourhood and why it's ideal for a family or for students or whatever, then you should be able to show your property to a prospective tenant or buyer, depending on what your strategy is, and give them this report. And bingo, you're say you're 1 ahead of the game, you're about 10 ahead of the game in doing that. And when I said I come back to lenders in a minute, the point about the lender side is that the lenders are going to increasingly need to see that the neighbourhood and the location is viable from the point of view of the project. If you want to borrow 75, 80, 85%, when 85% LTVs come back, you're going to have to persuade a lender that you know what you're talking about. And in knowing what you're talking about, they will want to have it clearly demonstrated to them that your ideas stack up, that they're checkable, that the lender and the JV partner, for that matter, can carry out their own due diligence on what you have included in this report. So make it friendly, make it accurate, drill down as far as you can go, but also treat it as a sales document. Okay? Now to move on, to scroll on down. So we then come to the media, and here you pick up the newspapers, websites, and radio stations. We've left TV stations out. If there are local TV stations, they should be included. Scrolling on down, the next section we come to is about the neighbourhood. Now, we'll go on to Rightmove and show you how to draw a location and also a neighbourhood and how to identify them later in this tutorial, or maybe it will be in part 3. I don't know how long part 2 will last, for 20 minutes or thereabouts. But my concept of neighbourhoods is that, well, first of all, let's go back to the location business. Big buzzy words, location, but we don't actually live in locations. Sorry about that. We don't actually live in locations. You can see this is live, can't you? I'm not even going to stop for that error. We don't actually live in locations. We live in neighbourhoods. Ask somebody where they live. They don't say, oh, I live in such and such a location. It never comes into it. We don't have locationers living next door. We have neighbours living next door. So if we talk about I live in a neighbourhood, immediately people know what you're talking about. They know it's a relatively small area. They know that, for instance, there's a neighbourhood watch scheme going on. They identify with the concept far more than they identify with the concept of a location. Now, what constitutes a neighbourhood? Well, from my point of view, a neighbourhood has physical boundaries to it, which means often that you can't just go a house that could be 50 yards away, which could be described as being part of the neighbourhood. If that house is the other side of a rail line, it's not in your neighbourhood anymore. You may not even know who lives there, whereas you probably will know who lives 50 yards down the road. So you need to have a north, south, east and west boundary, and the boundaries, and I'll show you later what I mean. The boundaries are major roads, and by that I mean A roads, obviously dual carriageways or ring roads. Railway lines, again, you can't just walk across them, even if you are there's a bridge over the rail line that you live next door to. I would still leave out the other side of the railway line from the neighbourhood that you live in. Parks, I'll show you again later that I used to live quite close to a park, so that formed a boundary round the neighbourhood that I lived in. Greenbelt areas, waterways, and think about taking a centre point and of about a quarter mile, maximum of half a mile around a centre point. Okay, so you should be able to walk across the neighbourhood in, I don't know, 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes at most. 20 minutes is 0.7 of a mile, so that would take you out to close on a mile diameter. That's almost too big. That's about it's about the maximum. And within that neighbourhood, you need to know everything about it. Identify where the shops are, where the pubs are, what type of housing is in the neighbourhood. We'll come on to this as we scroll down the information I want to know about the neighbourhood. And within a location, you should have 4 or 5 neighbourhoods. Let's scroll down. So first thing we come to is flooding, principally because if the location is in or near a floodplain, then you could have problems, particularly with regard to investing, because of the insurance difficulties on investing in properties that are liable to be flooded. And if you can't borrow to invest in the location, then remember that it's unlikely that anybody can borrow to buy your properties off you, and you need to have always a clear exit route if you are into property investment. Even if you're buying to let, you must see an exit route. I've always said that I don't buy to let, I buy to sell and let in the meantime. And I think that's a fairly good policy. Now we come down to the housing mix. And again, in understanding your location and neighbourhood, I'm going to stick with neighbourhoods from now on. In understanding your neighbourhood, you want to know what's there. So there are various types of houses, terrace, semis, etc. You need to know what is in there, whether they are private, local authority, housing association, or ex-local authority, because all this affects the feel of the neighbourhood. So go through and walk the streets, literally walk the streets. Don't rely on online due diligence, and you can do a huge amount of online due diligence. Walk the streets and see what's happening. And by walk the streets, I mean literally walk the streets. This is not a job you can do from a car. You can drive a car to a certain point, but then get out and walk. Get out and walk. Smell the streets, okay? You then look at tenant demand. Who wants to live there? Who are you going to be able to let your property to? Single parent, family, single person, professional sharer, student, and so forth, okay? They all have different requirements. A single parent, for instance, is probably going to be have less cash available than, say, a family or a single person, and therefore public transport will be important to them, whereas it may be less the case with a family or a single person. So you need to identify who your tenants are going to be, even if you are looking to flip. You still want to do this work, because if you're looking to flip as your strategy, the person who's going to buy the property off you may want to be maybe a landlord, and even if they're not a landlord, they're buying it for their own occupation. They may want to know what the letting possibilities are, just in case they have to let. So always consider, regardless of your strategy, consider the demand of your buyer, in that they may be a landlord, either positive or accidental. So then we come to buyer demand, and again you need to identify who your buyers are, and look at whether they're prepared, whether they will buy what you've got, and what they want. And then we come into the amenities, shopping and services, and once again you want to list and name the people. So scroll on down, and here we've got a whole list of various types of shops and facilities. Now, name them. Supermarket, don't just tick yes. I've come to the last item on the list. Don't just tick yes, a supermarket. Name the supermarket. A mile from Sainsbury's, half a mile from Tesco, whatever it is, okay? Include brand names, because once again, that gives an impression of good, better, or best as regards the neighbourhood. And then you've got very important aspects further up, back up the list: convenience stores, your 7 to 11 stores, dental practices, medical practices. All these are very important. Parking facilities and so forth. Okay, so go in, complete this list, and find out what's going on in the neighbourhood, and list it all down with brands, with names of the people that are trading. Okay, scroll on down. Now we now come to neighbourhood number 2. So I'm now going to switch this off and come back up with the next page, because we now repeat 5 neighbourhoods. So the same is repeated 5 times in the location report. Right, I've scrolled down, and the next major point I come to are tenant sources. Okay, and the first thing about tenant sources is major employers. So you need to identify who the major employers are for the tenants that you're looking to house. And in this particular case, there are 3 options, but you can always add more if you want to. We've listed 3. And it's important that you... Now, these are not necessarily major employers in the neighbourhood or major employers in the location even. They could be employers who are based, I don't know, 3-5 miles away, but they still, their employees still look to house themselves in the location and neighbourhoods that you're investing in. As an example, coming back to Oxford again, there's a big, huge teaching hospital in Oxford called the JR2. It's in Marston, but I know that the catchment area around the JR2 is probably about 5-8 miles out. And the medical practitioners, the doctors, the nurses and so forth are quite happy to live 5, 6, 7, 8 miles, maybe even 10 miles away from JR2. So you need to identify who the employers are, and also when you identify who the employers are that your tenants are going to be coming from, go see them, see whether they can assist you in letting your properties or selling your properties to their employees. Find out what they're looking for. They may have their own sort of criteria. They may look to impose their own standards on rented accommodation. So go find out what they want. See whether you can post details of the your properties in the employer's canteen or something of that nature. But identify the employers that you think you're going to find tenants from. Now scroll on down. Obviously university. If you're housing students, then you need to identify the university that they're going to be attending, and as much detail as you can possibly get here. And most of this information is available on the internet. The number of students, the address, obviously, etc., number of students, number of rooms in halls as well, the housing policy, that is very, very important. As an example, Oxford University requires students to live within 5 miles of the campus unless they have special permission to live farther away. So you need to find out what the housing policy is. The halls of residence, what are the rates per person? Because whatever the halls of residence are charging, you are not going to be able to charge a great deal more unless you've got something very special in your accommodation. But find out what they're charging. Find out what their standards are for HMOs and whether they have an accreditation scheme. You'll find that many universities need to check the accommodation first before they're prepared to list it. Find out where they recommend their students to live. They'll tell you the neighbourhoods that are particularly popular with students. So list that down. And also find out if they publish an information sheet for landlords. Many do. Oxford University, for example, publish a very comprehensive list of information for landlords. Does your local university do the same? If it doesn't do the same, it's worth looking at the something published, say about Oxford University, because if you're going up to university and the local university doesn't publish something, the obvious answer is to scroll around or Google around and find a university that does publish something. Look at that to get an indication as to what happens in any university. Also check to see whether they publish a student guide, and if they do, put links into it. Make all this information as easy as possible to read and to use. When you've completed this report, what you don't want to have happen is for somebody to say, oh, I wish they'd included this, or I wish they'd included that. Don't leave your customer, the person you're giving this report to, having to do work to get more information. Include it all in the report. Okay, I'm going to scroll on down. Hospitals. Now the same goes, hospitals are much like universities in the sense that you've got the address, obviously, the housing policy. They may have one, whether they have halls of residence, the old nurses' rooms, nurses' halls, again, and rates per person, whether they have their own HMO standards and recommended housing associations and links. So you include all the hospitals, and housing associations likewise, and the report allows for 2 housing associations. And once again, list the housing association with all contact details, their preferred locations. Where do they like their properties to be? I remember that when I was investing in London, we contacted the Notting Hill Housing Association to see whether they would be interested in taking properties from us that we were buying in Wandsworth, in the Clapham Battersea area. And they were interested, but they didn't actually want the properties in the locations that we were buying. They felt the locations were too good. They wanted them in slightly more run-down areas, which for one reason or another we weren't very happy with. So we didn't do a deal with the Notting Hill Housing Association. But find out where they want their properties to be, what their requirements are, and who their principal tenants are. Single mums, people with special needs, whatever. Find out who their principal tenants are, because what you should be doing with regard to, certainly with regard to investing in property to let, is you should be identifying who your tenant's going to be, what they want, and then go out and buy the product that they want. Okay? So you buy something which is fit for their purpose, not fit for your purpose. Your purpose and their purpose should be the same purpose. It's fit for their purpose. Okay? Now that brings me to the end of the second 20-minute section. So we're going to close this section off and restart again for part 3. Hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you're finding it interesting, and look forward to seeing you in part 3. Due diligence is a big subject, and I'm not surprised that we've already wrapped up 2 parts. We'll probably end up wrapping up 3 or 4 parts by the time we've finished. Anyway, I look forward to seeing you in part 3. Thank you.